This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.
Hey, love. I would like you to do me a favor. I'd like you to take a deep breath and repeat after me. Relationships are not hard. Dating is not hard. Let's try that one more time. Relationships are not hard. Dating is not hard. If this is your first time listening to me, welcome to the Confidently Cherished podcast. My name is Keshia Rice, and I am a dating coach for ambitious women of faith. And today's episode, I wanted to talk about this whole idea of relationships being hard, because what I find is that it's not the relationships with other people that are hard. It is the relationship with yourself that is affecting your relationships with other people. And there's 4 ways in which this is the case. So, one is the way in which we grew up. Psychologists say that most of the things that we believe, most of the values we have, about love, about money, about faith, most of these things were established between the ages of 0 and 7. Here in the United States, as I am recording this episode, people are headed to the polls for Election Day. There are midterm elections happening, so a lot of state races, Congress, that type of thing. And, I was having this discussion with a friend recently about how most people, at least in the United States, I won't speak for other countries that have democratic systems, but I feel like most of the people that at least I've encountered in the United States don't really think about their political views that much. The United States has an abysmal voter turnout rate to begin with. Not nearly as many people vote as they should. And of the ones who do vote, oftentimes, I've had this discussion with people before, and people sometimes don't even know why they support the party that they support. They support that party because they grew up in a household that supported that party, and their parents did, their grandparents did, and, so on and so forth. And they've never really stopped to question those beliefs themselves. I was thinking about this, and then I was also thinking about epigenetics and this idea that, according to epigenetics, generational trauma can be passed down in the mother's womb for 8 generations. So think about that. Think about the fact that in you right now is all of the struggle and hardship of 8 generations before you. And those struggles, they color how we think, how we feel, how we experience, and how we relate to others. So if you grew up in a home where you didn't feel stable, you didn't feel secure, you didn't feel unequivocally like your parents or the guardians who raised you loved you, or if you grew up in a home where, maybe you felt love, but maybe your parents didn't love each other and it was evident that they didn't love each other. If you grew up in a home where you constantly heard people badmouth love and relationships. I work with so many women who talk about their mothers and aunties and female cousins telling them when they were young that all men were trash, or that all men were cheaters, things like that. If you grew up hearing those type of negative things about love and relationships, the fact is our brain works very hard to keep us stable, to keep us in what is known. Our brain does not like change. It does not like the unfamiliar. And this is a protective mechanism. It's not like our brains are trying to hose us. But, the way we think very much is often a matter of better the devils we do know than the devils we don't know. So if you grew up in an environment hearing all these negative things about relationships, then of course it's going to color how you see other people. It's going to make you less trusting. It's going to make you less likely to be vulnerable. It is going to harden you up to some extent. So you are less emotionally available to relationships. And then you wonder why it is that you attract emotionally unavailable people. And it is not until you are at a point where you can take a step back and really think about the ways in which your environment colored your view on relationships. It is not until you're willing to be a generational curse breaker, step out from the ways that your family has done things, has operated, and get the counseling, get the therapy, get the coaching, get that accountability. It's not until you're willing and ready to truly make some mindset shifts that you will be able to easily step into relationships. If you are going into relationships with negative thought patterns that have been influenced onto you ever since you were a child, then of course, when you go out and you meet men, when you go out on dates, you're not really hearing the things that these men are saying. You're not really truly seeing the actions that they're doing, because everything you hear and see is going to be colored through this lens of men are trash, men are dogs. Everything you see is going to be colored through this lens of I'm not worthy of love, or I can't find healthy love because of those feelings in childhood are still translating now. The world is frankly full of people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s who are still, they may biologically be 40, 50, or 60, but in their minds, they are still that 7-year-old because they've never done the inner work. They've never done the prayer, the meditation, the journaling, the counseling. They've never done that work to really separate the family thoughts from their own thoughts. They've never done that work to look at the generational patterns that are in their families and to make that commitment to break some of those patterns and replace them with healthier ones. So that brings me to my second point, not just your childhood, but who you're surrounded by now. What you focus on magnifies, always. So when we find ourselves in positions where maybe we got away from people in our family who were unhealthy, but now we are in a situation with friends, with chosen family that is still unhealthy, then, this doesn't change. So I can think myself when I was single, this is a story for another episode, although I think I've talked about this before. Basically, my self-development journey started with a quarter-life crisis and breaking down and crying while planning a friend's wedding shower. But in that time, like after that whole breakdown happened, I started going to therapy, and yes, I started working on family dramas and unhealthy patterns in my own family. But I also realized that I had to get rid of not just one, but several of my friends in my process to become healthier. Because what I was realizing was that when I looked at some of my past relationships, there were some men that I dated who were decent men, and I allowed friends of mine to convince me to leave those relationships. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they made me in those relationships or that I lost out because, in the end, I ended up with my husband. But when I thought about it, although those relationships would have eventually ended over other reasons, there were definitely times where, when I look at it now from a different perspective, I can see that I had friends who were happy as long as we were all single, as long as we were all in the same boat. But when, not just relationships either, when situations changed so that one person in the friend group was doing much better than the others, then there was always some way to try to pull that person down. Very crabs in a barrel type mentality. And, I don't blame those friends. Like, one, we were much younger at the time. And two, some people are unhealthy people, but they also don't recognize that they're unhealthy people. Like, not everybody in your life who is manipulative or who is controlling, who is toxic. Not all these people recognize that they're toxic. Now, don't get me wrong, you still need to leave the relationship. And pray that they come to those realizations someday. But this is why you also have to leave in peace and kind of recognize that you're just doing what's best for you. And there's no need to hate on them. But if you are in these types of environments, again, as a man thinketh, so is he. So if you're in these types of environments, of course, it's going to be difficult to be in healthy relationships. And you're going to find relationships hard because every time you meet someone, every time you're dating someone, you're constantly going to have this unhealthy environment in your ear. And it's not just with your friends either. It is also the environment and, the music that you listen to, what you're following on social media. I have clients who I have had to lecture because they will send me stuff on TikTok. They'll send me stuff on Instagram and they'll be like, you should talk about this. And the posts that they're sending me are women trashing men. Let's be real. In this day and age, we all spend way too much time on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, whatever your social platform of choice is. And if you're spending an hour or more a day on these platforms, which is not at all uncommon, you definitely do not need to be spending that time listening to people talk about things that aren't edifying. You don't need to spend that time putting yourself down, putting yourself in a mind frame to look at the world from a everyone is out to get you type perspective. That is going to do absolutely nothing for creating healthy love. Same with music. I promise you, you are not going to be able to stay in a mindset that is loving, that is healthy, that is edifying, that promotes healthy relationships. You're not going to be able to stay in that mindset if you're constantly listening to female singers talking about scamming on men or talking about men being trash. You're not going to be able to stay in a healthy, loving mindset if you're listening to male singers talking about sleeping with women and then just moving on to the next. Like, if the music that you're listening to, if the TV shows that you're watching, if the forums that you're reading online, the accounts you're following on social media are talking about toxic relationships all the time, it most definitely will seep into your system, and it will change the way that you interact with men. It will cause you to also interact in an unhealthy, toxic way. The third thing that you need to work on is if you've been betrayed in the past and you still haven't done the work to heal from that relationship. It's not easy getting over a heartbreak. It's not easy getting over the end of a relationship. But, what I find is that the most difficult part of getting over the relationship is not the other person. It's oftentimes the disappointment that we feel in ourselves. I work with so many women who are high achievers, right? So a lot of my clients are perfectionists. A lot of them are really successful, really ambitious women. And because of that, oftentimes when a relationship ends, there's a lot of blaming of themselves for the end of the relationship. There's a lot of, oh, I should have known better. I should have spotted these red flags. I should have seen this coming. That type of mentality. And, a little bit of that can be helpful. When a relationship ends, you most definitely should take some time to debrief it, to go back and look at what were the red flags that you didn't notice in the beginning. What were the things that you ignored? How can you do a better job at trusting your own discernment and trusting your own intuition? At the same time, too much of that leads women to a point where they feel like they're undeserving of love, or they feel like they're not worthy because they made so many mistakes in the past. Or my favorite is that I will hear a woman say, oh, well, men can't be trusted. And the fact is no, it's not that she doesn't trust men. She no longer trusts herself. She no longer trusts that she has good judgment because she made one mistake. And we all make mistakes. And she no longer trusts that because she had a rough time dealing with that one heartbreak, she no longer trusts that she's going to be okay if another relationship turns out the same way. It is not until you work on these feelings of trustworthiness in yourself, these feelings of worthiness in yourself, it is not until you're able to get that confidence back that you're going to be in a position of being in a healthy relationship. And without those things, relationships will feel hard because you will feel like you can't trust anyone. You will feel like you can't allow anyone to get too close. And if someone can't get too close to you, then you won't have intimacy. Intimacy is more than a physical act. Intimacy is emotional and mental as well. And you don't have those things if you're putting up walls. You can't have emotionally intelligent conversations with someone if you are emotionally unavailable. You can't get to know someone well enough to know whether or not they can be trusted if you can't be vulnerable with them. And this is why the relationship feels hard, because you're not in a position to really develop true connection. And that brings me to my final reason why is your relationship with yourself that is hard, and not necessarily the relationship with others. And that is the pressure of society oftentimes on women. There is so much pressure on us time-wise, for starters. The whole idea of the biological clock and getting married before a certain age and making sure you don't, quote unquote, hit the wall, if you've ever listened to the Men with podcast. And look, for starters, I have always believed and always will believe that everything happens in the perfect timing. Not the timing you want, but in the perfect timing. If things had happened in the time that I wanted, I probably would have gotten married like straight out of college, right? And not, there was a 3 next to my age when I got married. But I also recognize that if things had happened the way I wanted, I would most definitely be divorced by now. Just because of when I think of who I was dating at that time. And I also think of, the person that I was at that time was not a person who should have been anybody's wife. Younger version of me was frankly too selfish to be married. Younger version of me was also very limited. Younger version of me was still working through a lot of things in my family, that unhealthy patterns that I had seen that made me feel very jaded about marriage. Even though I wanted to get married, I was very jaded about it. So that pressure, though, to beat the clock, that pressure to get married by a certain age, that pressure to start a family, to have children by a certain age, it often leads women to settling. It often leads women to lowering their standards. And then when you lower your standard, you end up in trash relationships. And then dating feels hard. Relationships feel hard because, yes, it's going to be hard if you're with someone who is trash. There's also this idea that as women, we're supposed to be good girls. We're supposed to make everyone happy. We're supposed to aim to please. And again, this leads to women not setting boundaries, not enforcing boundaries. Without those boundaries, you will never have a healthy relationship, because boundaries are not about punishing somebody else. Boundaries are about the parameters that you need to set in place so that you can be a better whatever the relationship is. I have boundaries with my husband so that I can be a good wife to him. For example, my husband knows that when I am working, because I work from home, he knows that when I am done working, that when I finish, I don't want to immediately talk to him. I want to take some time to kind of decompress and shift from work mode into wife mode. That is a boundary. And I remember talking to a friend of mine about this, and she asked me when I told him this, that I wanted some time after I was done working. Was he okay with that? Did I hurt his feelings? Was I worried about hurting his feelings? And I told her no, because don't get me wrong, I love my husband. I would never want to hurt his feelings, but I also know at the same time that when I have that time to decompress, I am a much better wife. I am more present. I'm not spending time with him while running in my head like the to-do list that I need to do for the next day. I'm not spending time with him secretly resentful because I'm thinking of a deadline that I need to meet. I have that time to put away all the things of work and focus on family mode at that point. And that's what boundaries do. Boundaries are the things that enable you to be a better wife, a better mother, a better daughter, a better sister, a better friend. But so many women, back to the first point I made, so many women, because of their conditioning growing up, are afraid to set boundaries, and they're afraid to talk about boundaries. They're afraid to enforce these boundaries, that then they get in relationships and then a man walks all over them, a man betrays them, a man doesn't treat them well, and then dating is hard, relationships are hard. No, your boundaries are too soft. That was the problem.
because women are told to be nice, because women are told to make others happy, there's a thing of not setting standards. It astounds me how often I see videos on TikTok, on Instagram, that are something along the lines of a woman saying that she doesn't want to date a man who's broke, and people attacking her in the comments section because, God forbid, she has a standard. Like, really? Really though? Because I don't think anybody should get married if they're not financially stable, male or female. So that is in my opinion, a basic standard to hold, that no, a broke man shouldn't get married because a broke woman shouldn't get married either. I think it goes both ways. But people feel like they aren't allowed to set standards. People feel like expecting someone to be loyal to you and not cheat is asking too much. People feel like expecting someone to be kind to you is asking too much. That asking for consistency, consideration, authenticity, emotional intelligence, expecting a grown person to act like a grown person is asking too much. I want to make this very clear. You are not asking for too much. You are not. Not only are you worthy and deserving of so much more, you're worthy and deserving of being cherished. You know, this podcast has the name it does for a reason. You're worthy of being cherished. You're worthy of being loved. You're worthy of being respected, of being admired. You're worthy of so much more. But not only are you worthy of those things, but I really, really, truly believe that being a decent human being should be a basic standard for marriage, don't you? But we allow ourselves to get so caught up in the conditioning of what will people think if I dare to ask for more than the bare minimum? If I dare to ask that the bar not be in hell, you know? If I dare to expect that because I am a good person, therefore I should also be with a good person. Look, love, at the end of the day, those people, whoever those people are, you know who they are. Because when I said those people, at least one person popped up in your mind. Those people don't pay your bills. Those people don't live with you. Those people don't have a heaven or a hell to place you in. Those people don't have to live your life. So you have to set those standards. You have to have those boundaries. You have to have that confidence and trust in yourself. And you also have to put the systems in place that allow you to relate to others in a healthy way, whether that is therapy, whether that is a coach, whether that is reading the books, listening to the podcast, journaling. But you need to be doing that work. And when you do those things, I promise you that relationships and dating are not going to be hard. That doesn't mean they don't come without conflict. That doesn't mean that they don't come with disappointment. Sometimes you will date a guy and you will realize that he is Mr. Right now, but he's not Mr. Right. That doesn't mean that there's no work, because relationships always require work. There's a commitment. There's a commitment to communicate with the other person. There's a commitment to be vulnerable with the other person. There's a commitment to share, to be consistent. You know, the same things that you would want out of your partner. You need to be those things too. But that work is not hard. That work doesn't feel like work when you're with someone that you truly love and who also truly loves you, which also brings me to another thought about societal conditioning. If you're confused, he doesn't love you, boo. I know that as kids, we were taught that, oh, like little boys are going to chase you around all the time, and they're going to play games, and they're going to do this and do that. But yeah, children act like that. But once you get to the point where you are grown, not so much. So if you are in a relationship with someone who's not giving you consistency, if you're in a relationship with someone who doesn't clearly express how they feel about you, if you are in a relationship with someone who has not made their plans clear, you say you want commitment and their response is, let's take it a day at a time, let's just chill, let's just see how it goes. If you are not getting clearly, I want to commit to you, I am looking for marriage just the way that you are looking for marriage, and I think that we might be the right people for each other. If you're not getting that type of communication, then he's just not that into you. Point blank, period. This is the other reason why you think relationships are hard. Because you are so determined to try to make the narrative fit what you want it to be instead of seeing what it is. I'm not saying that to be harsh. Like, I've been there, right? I can think of being in relationships where I wanted it so hard to be a thing, and had to come to terms with the fact that it was not a thing. At least not on his side. It definitely was not a thing. And that hurts and that sucks, right? But at the same time, why would I settle for that? Like, why would you settle for that? Why wouldn't you want to be in a relationship where you were sure, where you knew how the person felt about you? Why wouldn't you want to be in a relationship where you could sleep peacefully at night knowing where you stand? Why wouldn't you want to be in a relationship knowing that as women, because, you know, naturally we are nurturing and caring and all that. If you are taking the time to pour all that nurture and care into someone, wouldn't you want to be confident and sure that you are loved and cherished? There's nothing. The spirit of confusion is not a spirit you want to live in anything, in any of your relationships. So if that spirit is invading your relationship, that's a sign that you need to leave that relationship. And a lot of that also comes to your relationship with yourself. Because when you are confident in yourself, when you know that you are worthy, when you know you are deserving, you can walk. When you know that you deserve love, when you know that you deserve to know where you stand with someone, if a person is playing games, then, you know, they can play all the stupid games they want and win all the stupid prizes that they want because you're not afraid to walk. You know, at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you are fearfully and wonderfully made and you will be okay. So, love, I just want to leave you with that thought. Relationships are not hard. They were never created to be hard. And if they are hard, then I want you to ask yourself, what is it about the way in which you are showing up and in which you are relating to this other person that is difficult? So, let me know what you think about this episode, and let me know why you think relationships are hard if you had that thought before listening to this. I am on Instagram and TikTok at Keshia Rice on both platforms, at Keshia Rice, Rice. And, continue the conversation there. Feel free to comment on my latest post or to DM me. Let me know. Why do you think relationships are hard? Why do you think dating is hard? And after listening to this, what are you going to do to make it less hard? I love you so much. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Hey there. So you made it all the way to the end of the episode, which means I have two things to say. One, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And two, you like me. You really like me. So I would appreciate it if you would show that like by subscribing to this podcast so that more people can hear about it and enjoy it as much as you do. And if you want to know more about any of the links that I mentioned on this episode or any guests that I've had, be sure to go to KeshiaRice.com/links. That's KeshiaRice.com/links. I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. So see you then.